Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the King CJ Music Podcast. We talk culture, music, news, and a lot of other things that I do love talking about, but it's also music related. That becomes music releases. So this is an interesting conversation to have. So let me introduce myself. I'm your CJ. We're available anywhere that you listen to podcasts. If that's Amazon, that's Spotify, if that's Apple Podcasts, we're there. We're there on all the platforms that you listen to music on. But today's conversation, it's an interesting conversation to have, right? Because I've been having this conversation with people, and the topics we're going to talk about today, it's really a topic heavy episode. So if you don't like I cover like heavy topic episodes, this may not be the episode for you, right? This truly may not be the episode for you. In all fairness, it may not be. But so we're gonna talk. I think this is the thing. And so people were like, I'm not sure why you are so focused on this Kendrick and Drake beef. And my emphasis was around family matters. And people couldn't understand because they were like, I don't understand. There were not many disses at Kendrick Lamar. There are more disses at A$AP Rocky. And others. So why are you so interested in this per se, like album, or this single that he put out? It's because Family Matters. Drake does a line which I love. It's a unique line because he says, "Ask your wife this, and I got her after. I had her after you, right? Or ask your wife, right?" And I think that's the Travis Scott line that he threw in there. But also he says, the only time I hear about you is when it's fashion. And in order for you to drop another album, you're gonna have another kid, which is ironic. Because this is ironic because A$AP Rocky dropped Hijack, and his album drops the end of this month, which I think is interesting, right? Because the context of it, right? It's very interesting, right? It's interesting for a lot of different things. It's interesting for a lot of different reasons. But like these two lines in himself where he says, "Get back with your wife," which is that Travis Scott line. He flips it because Drake flipped it. And then he goes and says, "The people asked for me to drop, so I dropped." And so this is the thing. And it's a weird thing because people are like, hey, the only person we care from A$AP to hear is A$AP Ferg. And A$AP Ferg was A$AP Mob with A$AP Rocky. But A$AP Rocky, to a lot of people, to the mainstream media, is more famous, but A$AP Ferg is friends with Sean. So it's interesting, right? Because and then this was one of my concerns. A lot of people are gonna throw shots at Family Matters, especially when they need to drop a single for an album. And Drake does that for a lot of people with Family Matters. For if Rick Ross wants to drop an album, just take a shot, right? But this is my question, and this is a lot of people's questions. Why did he do it now? Right? Because we assume his album that he's dropping, Don't Be Dumb, we're assuming from all the leaks and from all the interviews people have given, people have said that it's diss heavy of Drake. If it's diss heavy of Drake, why are we just now hearing this? I think this is the thing. And it's a weird contradiction because this is what I'm seeing with a lot of artists. He's not part of the culture, right? But he put a lot of artists on, but because if these allegations are true, I would have not waited until we got into a diss or beef situation before I released this information. But this is interesting, right? Because it's weird to me because you say this and then you, it's just interesting to me. Why did you wait? Why did you wait? I think if you wanted hype for your album, I think if Kendrick dropped, Drake dropped, and then you dropped again, it'd have been great, right? I think if artists had got in there in between it and dropped, it'd been interesting. I think that's what Rick Ross was trying to do, but no one would drop with him, which Rick Ross, you're good at marketing, but I don't know if that was the reason why you should do it. So this leads me to my next topic, and my next topic as it relates to Drake and the Kendrick beef. It seems that many people that are on that TDE label, Top Dog Entertainment label, cannot get into Canada to perform their shows. And so this is a conversation in which I'm interested. Does Drake have so much pull in Canada that he's not letting people perform in Canada and their shows are being canceled from promoters? Because I think you look at their venue and you go, okay, Sir's not bringing this much, Schoolboy Q's not bringing this much entertainment in Canada, but Drake, we know, can bring this much entertainment to us. So do we listen to him? And it's weird because I don't know, because there are a lot of people in Canada that didn't like the way that Kendrick responded to Drake, YG being one of them, and YG or Drake may have that pull. And they're like, hey, we don't want you in this city. And this would be a prime example, but when Rick Ross allegedly got hit in the face by Drake fans, right? So this is the conversation we're having, is does he have this much pull? And people testing Rick Ross, because he said anytime, anywhere, you test them, and they tested him. The conversation is, what is Canada? I mean, Canada has a lot of amazing artists. Party Next Door, The Weeknd, Drake. But the thing is, does Drake have that much pull? Right? Because there was a lot of people when they were touring in Canada saying they couldn't get in, they would call Drake and thank Drake for letting them get in. So is this a Canadian issue or is this a Drake issue? And Canada having Drake's back of, hey, we don't want you to perform here. The same thing is with Houston. And this is why I say, Drake, I don't know if he is, but Mob Ties was the assumption that he was, and we have a reference track for it now, but he ran with circles with Jay Prince. And Jay Prince is known to be one of the best promoters, known to have connections, right? So the question that I'm hearing is, did he make it illegal for people to stop playing that on certain radio stations, not to play it in Houston? And I don't know, right? The question, I'll never know, right? I don't have those connections like that, so let me be upfront with that, right? But so most of these are assumptions. But it is interesting to me, right? Because if that is a true fact, right, that just shows you how much pull he has in Canada and in Houston. Because that's not a simple thing to do. That's not a simple check to do. It's just not. Because if we look at the numbers, I think Sir pulls better in Canada. Sir does make more. He'd be better in Canada. Party would do better in Canada. It's weird, right? It's weird to me because a lot of things are happening from this beef that I'm not entirely sure will happen. I don't know, because this topic, when I was thinking about it, I was like, well, not necessarily. I mean, we could say that this is, Canada has had a hard, season. Schoolboy Q, it was a tornado, or a hurricane. So that's maybe why his show got canceled. But then we look at Sir got canceled, and Schoolboy Q sit down. And I think if you're Sir, you want to go to Canada. I think you do, because the connections musically, I think if I am Sir, that's where I want to go. And so if your label mate is telling you, hey, you can't do this, that's fine. So the question will be, does Kendrick have enough? Does somebody in TDE have enough to pull to not let Drake in to California? I assume that'd be the question. Because allegedly he has a house in Houston, and allegedly he can always go to Miami, because Rick Ross can't stop that. So this is interesting to me, right? This is interesting to me because a lot of people are also dissing Drake, Childish Gambino, A$AP Rocky. These are not the only people to diss. So my question is, what is he starting at? 50 Cent has previously said that he's facing the backlash of having too much success. Which is interesting, because if this assumption is true about 50, then that means he's been running the game for 15, 20 years. Right? 15, 20 years. 15, 20 years. And so we're in a weird spot as hip hop fans, because if we take it at face value, he's not wrong. Take Care, Nothing Was the Same, Views, If You're Reading This, It's Too Late. Like, these albums are legendary to people. So I don't know, right? Like, I don't know. But it is. So this is the thing, and this is, I'll say that this is my last part of particular Kendrick part. But it's interesting. He said, "Oh, for all the dogs is gonna get buried." Right. He said, "For all the dogs is gonna get buried," and so it's just interesting to me. Everyone's dropping in August. Big Sean, Scoop, ASAP Rocky, everyone came out the works to drop this album. Right? It's interesting to me to look at, because I'm like, that's interesting timing. Did you know they were dropping? It's interesting. So the question we're having now is, does the Drake effect still exist? And we're going to define the Drake effect, because I've heard many people use the Drake effect. I've used it. And I think it's just like buzzword terms at this point. Does the Drake effect still exist? And so let me give you a simple kind of comparison what the Drake effect is to me. The Drake effect is an artist's view, an artist sales before the mention, the feature, the track that's being shown, the promotion that Drake is on a single. How does it do? And for a lot of people, it doesn't go well. I think this is the thing. So the equation for streams versus sales is a tricky one, because it's 150 streams. 150 streams equals one track being sold, right? It takes 150 streams for one song to be sold, but then it takes 150,000 tracks to be sold for one album. It's weird. It's weird, right? It's weird. But overall, like, looking at these comparisons, it's hard for me to go, yeah, no, that's not true. I think the Drake effect is still true. As Lil Yachty said, he said he regrets it, but I think it's still in effect. I think we're still seeing it, right? Because the album, like the songs where he had Healing, that album did numbers. We don't know the official numbers yet, but the song did numbers. So I don't necessarily know if we're like, hey, this didn't do what we wanted it to do, sure, but it still did numbers with a Drake feature, which, as I said, is interesting. So this is gonna be like the last topic we're gonna talk about, and so it's the last topic. It's the last topic, but it's the second from last topic, but it is a long topic, and this topic will be: should we create a different category or a catalog or records for older artists that are releasing new music? And so this falls into a lot of people, because when we say older artists, what are we talking? Because a lot of artists are getting on at a younger age, but also some artists are getting on at a older age, right? Because Michael, by Killer Mike, Michael's in his early 30s, I believe. X was like barely that when he became famous. Lil Mabu, he got on when he was younger. Lil Wayne got on when he was a teenager, still in high school, right? So the question remains: when we say older artists, how do we define it? 10 years in the game, 20 years in the game, right? Because recently we've seen with the death of Slim Shady, we've seen with 444, by Jay-Z. These are both older artists because they've been in the game for a long time. However, the question becomes, what makes them the older artists for the older catalog? Because Cool J just dropped a song, but Black Thought and the Roots have more. Andre 3000, they're they're artists, but they're not big artists by themselves, right? The Roots, Outkast, right? So it's basically Wu-Tang versus, it's like Redman. It's like Redman versus Method Man. Method Man's more famous individually, but when they're together, Wu-Tang is amazing. When we talk about Andre 3000, Andre 3000 works may not be as valuable as like Outkast. Black Thought may not be as best as the roots, right? It's this conversation of what makes them old, what makes them older artists. Because is it by age? Because by that, then Wayne should be a senior and none of his music should be classified under the newer artist. But at the same time, these albums are by artist. No Reasonable Doubt has what, 5 albums? Drake has 5. Kendrick has 4. Like these albums, like the number of studio albums they have released is crazy. But like Lil Wayne has dropped so many mixtapes that his albums don't translate, right? If they're mixtape heavy, are they already classified as like older artists? Are people like Jay Electrica that drops albums every like 10 years? We got the Act too, but like that's what I'm saying. Like, what do we classify as older artists? Do they have more than 3 albums? Do they have more than 4? Are they 10 years in the game strong, or are they 5 years in the game strong? How do we put these in a different category? My second question is this: how many albums qualify? And I think I kind of went around about that. And so my second question is, does the age of the artist matter? And the reason I'm asking this question is because if J. Cole puts the Fallout, he'll be roughly still young, right? X was shot when he was younger, so he wouldn't be in the older category. J. Cole, let's say he drops it this year, he'll be 39, so it'd be barely 40. But Hove, Lil Wayne are in predominantly. Jay-Z's 54. So do we start at 40? Do we start at 30? Do we do 10 years into the game? Then we classify them as older artists, right? Because if it's body of work, that's fine. But then we have people like Fetty Wap, where Fetty Wap dropped Trap Queen, and like Fetty Wap dropped, he'll be 33. He'll still be under that 40 age limit, but his most popular song, his most famous song is Trap Queen, or 679, which came out in 2015, which means he'll be right on that 10-year mark. But is that how we classify it, or do we classify it by hits? Because then we have a conversation that needs to be had, which it's interesting to me, right? Because if we do the category and you must be at the minimum age of 29, a lot of artists aren't in there, right? Because you have to be 10 years in the game and you have to be 29. I think you get Drake, you get Wayne, you get Hove, you get Eminem, you get, right? But you don't get like X, you don't get Little Tekken, you don't get Juice WRLD, right? Like, you get artists, but you don't get a lot of artists that are like considered the greats. You don't get Pac, you don't get Biggie. Like this, that's my question. Like, if we set the minimum age at 29, there's a lot of artists that have died before the age of 29 because they're in the 27 or lower club, which 27 club is making to the age of 27 and then something tragically happening to you. But like, this is the conversation we need to have. If we're creating a newer category, we need to like specify what we're doing. But it is interesting. And also, the other question I have is the format. The question overall is the format. I think because we have Billboard, we have Complex, we have all of this. Who runs the ranking system? Is there a way that we're going to do this ranking system with like people that are actually in the 500 people in the rap industry, or are we doing this based off of sales? Are we doing this off of fan numbers, fan reporting, fan polling? Or are we doing this strictly from sales that are from physical copies? Because it was physical copies being sold and that's how they made their money. Or are we doing digital copies? And if we do digital copies, are we still using the same numbers for streaming that we were using for the newer generation? So these are questions I think we need to consider before we have this conversation of should we create a category for older artists. Okay, so the next question I have is, who does it benefit, right? Who does it who does the new ranking benefit? Does it benefit the older artists? Because if the older artists are, for example, if Jay-Z and Nas release the same day, because it's happened multiple times, is it, do the numbers matter based on the singles being sold? And is it across all genres? Right? Because it's interesting to me, because this is, okay, who does it benefit? Because are people still going to have to use like Complex, use Billboard, use the RIAA to like prove like who has a better ranking system? And if the ranking system looks different for each website or each statistics, how do we settle it? Okay, let's say Jay-Z's on this one, Nas is on this one, but let's say KRS-One, Jadakiss is on this other like chart as the ranking. What is the more reliable source? That'll be a question. However, this is where I think this conversation falls flat. Or specifically where I think this argument of, hey, let's create a new category for older artists because they shouldn't be competing with newer artists, falls flat. Because this is what people constantly say. Oh, rap is a competition, it's a sport, so they should have to prove that they're worth it. If they gotta prove it to the younger generation, they gotta prove it to another generation underneath them, a generation above them, and the current generation that loves them. Why not use the same chart we're already using? Because you say it's a competition, so that albums, no matter what, should still rank higher than the newer artists that are coming out. But see, that's not gonna sit well, and that's not gonna land well with a lot of people. But that's the conversation we need to have. That's not a conversation we can just avoid, because if you say rap's a competition, fine, then we shouldn't need a new category. They should be battling newer artists. Right, that's the end of the conversation. Right, that's the end of the conversation, because they should be battling newer artists in the discussion. But if you want to create a new category, then we must have this discussion. So it's weird. Okay, so this news is sadder when we get to it, but it's about Pnd Rock. And so as I said previously in the opener, I'm not a lawyer. I have some background in criminal justice, but not a huge background in criminal justice. I'm not a lawyer. So this is not legal advice. So this is where I struggle. Being he got killed, his ex-wife made a statement just kind of saying that it was a sad day. But the thing is, this is where, so the people that shot Pnd Rock, the assumption is that he is a minor or a teenager at the time. So then they put him on house arrest. And I believe he did an interview on Jumper. Adam's kind of like, no, Jumper, his kind of idea of a podcast. And so the question becomes, right? And so I assume, right, the news came out that they're assuming, well, the assumption before this was that the prosecutors do not have enough evidence to charge him with this, what was it, manslaughter? Premeditated? They didn't have enough evidence to charge him with the crime, for committing crimes. And so when we talk about they're saying they were reporting that he was a teenager. So if they report him as a teenager, he's in the juvenile justice system. And the juvenile justice system works in a few different ways. The question of culpability. Do they understand the crime that they have committed? And do they understand how the trial will be working for them? Which the juvenile justice system, let's just say, from Stanley has the same thing. The idea that the juvenile justice system, the question is it effective, right? And so we'll never know. The overlying question is the juvenile justice system effective? You know, that'd make a good research question. But the overall question is if if he can stand trial. And usually culpability is a weird thing because people have never heard of it, and so they are like, I don't understand culpability. Anyway, I'm breaking juvenile justice. I'm just quick, just a tad bit. So if a juvenile commits a crime, they usually have different ways they do it. A lot of people are known for the reinforcement of putting somebody in juvie, but what they don't know about juvenile justice system is that they have diversion programs. Diversion programs are something where you join a program, you do some program up until you're 18, and usually they'll dismiss your record of the crime. However, if the crime is too severe, like murder is one of them, they may sign a waiver to take you to adult court. While looking at this record, it does not seem like a waiver was filled out, so I'm not entirely sure to charge you with a more heinous crime. The DA did not do that, and if the DA did that's telling my bad. But I have not seen a waiver be signed in any of the court documents that I've seen. However, they didn't do that. And what's being reported is that they said the defendant, at the time, he's not culpable. And usually culpability is not competent in trial. It's usually done by psychologists and other experts to determine if this person understands how the trial is going to go. Like the defense attorney, that could also be him to say, like, I don't want attorneys. There's a lot of stuff that go into making somebody not culpable to stay in trial. And so that's that verdict on that. And I think that for a lot of people, that may seem, let me put this in here. I am not saying by any means, don't take this as me saying, hey, let the streets handle that. I'm not saying that at all. I hope he's protected, and I hope nothing bad happens to him. Let me put it like that. At the same time, it's weird. I think it's weird. Like this conversation of, do we post where we're at while we're at the location or after, is a weird conversation that celebrities must have and we must have. Like, this is a conversation I want to have, a town hall that I'm probably going to set up and try to create. I'm going to probably try to get a lot of rappers. If you are, give me 1 minute. Okay, if you are a rapper by any means, and I do want to set this town hall up in like a Virginia thing, reach out to me, because I do want to do like a town hall. I don't know if I'm doing a Zoom town hall, but I do want to have like a town hall discussion with artists, and like, what's that protocol? Because I think the protocol has changed a lot, and so people not having publicists, we're not used to this change, and so it's interesting to me, right? Because I think if you ask me, do I think there should be protocols to protect artists? Yes. Do I think the protocols were followed? No. Do I think when we question culpability of adolescents, we'll say adolescents because I assume he's under 18 and adolescents is 13 and 17, or emerging adulthood, which is still before the brain fully develops, this is the weirdest thing. I think culpability, or how can they stand trial, is a question in which, and I don't mean this in a negative way, but I think the question of if you commit a crime and you're an adolescent, I think it's a lot of gray area, but I think the question becomes, did they understand the crime they were committing? And I think I think a lot of people don't have a sense of the juvenile justice system or the court system completely. But I think, for certain crimes, I think the conversation needs to be had of what do we talk about when they're competent to stand trial. I don't know if we need more guidelines, or I'm not entirely sure. And this isn't me like going for like, hey, I need to reform. That's the conversation that brings a lot of other stuff into it. I just think this is gonna be it's a weird topic to cover because we've seen many artists, Young Dolph, we also seen a lot of people end up in weird situations, which, like, looking back at it and knowing I reported this as news is something in which I honestly do not understand as a culture. I don't know. It's a weird thing to listen to as a culture and go, hey, do we think this is effective? But see, I think that for that I need experts. I think to have that conversation, I need experts on the field. I think there aren't things where I'm like, hey, this isn't something we can just handle if we don't have the right conversation. And so this year, I think for this season, this episode, I'm gonna try to have more conversations about this. I'm kind of bring a lot of people into these conversations. It's interesting to me, right? Because these conversations I do want to have, but I think, all fairness, to have these conversations, you kind of have to be non-biased about how you handle these situations, and I'm not entirely sure if we can say I answered. It's weird. I don't know. So this is kind of the newer format I'm gonna go with. I'm gonna go off like a bunch of topics about the week, and I'm gonna have these discussions and talk about these discussions. I didn't do my recommendations, but I will do my recommendations now. My recommendations for the week is Stormzy. Stormzy is still disappointed. It was a diss track originally, and it's one of the funniest tracks I've heard today. So it's gonna be different. I think these formats are gonna be a lot different. I think we'll probably put like 2 episodes out a week. But this is kind of the test run of how do people like this? Because this episode is me just kind of talking for like roughly 30 minutes to an hour, where we're talking about a lot of different topics and we try to cover them as one person does, and it's interesting to me. We have a Instagram if anybody wants to follow. We do have an Instagram for that, so that's always fun. If you want to know the Instagram, give me a minute. It is the King CJ03 Music Podcast on Instagram. It's the King CJ Music Podcast on Twitter. These are where you will find updates on conversations we have had on just kind of on like anything we're having for the episode, where updates will be. So with that being said, I do hope you enjoy this episode. This is a newer style, so I'm trying it out. With that being said, I really do hope you enjoy.